Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Baltimore City Planning Commission special meeting on the Capital Improvement Program. And sitting next to me is Chris Ryer, the Director of Planning and Secretary for the Commission. I asked Mr. Ryer to call roll.
Yes, Robin Allen is not here. She will be a little bit late. Marcia Collins.
Present.
Honorable Eric Costello. Not here. Talib Horn.
Present.
Claudia Jolin.
Present.
Doug McCoach.
Present.
Justin Williams is not here. Eric Stevenson is
Here, but he's
in the
not
building.
physically here.
Yeah.
He's back there munching on bagels and donuts.
And Sean Davis.
Here. So the way, ideally, we'd like this to run is you have the opportunity to give your presentation, which we're really excited about. And then we'll be able to ask you questions. If there's anybody here from the public, we typically would open it up for public comment, not for questions to you, but questions to the commission. So with that, welcome and turn it over.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Corinne Johnson. I'm the Director for the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. It's my pleasure to be here with you all today. Please bear with me. I'm still recovering from something. I'm perfectly healthy, but it's just the lingering effects of my throat, so it might give me some challenges here and there. So without any further ado, I'm going to get started. We've been here, we've said this again. As far as DOT's mission, I always still want to make it very plain that we are focused on safety, reliability, accessible, and efficient transportation system. So for me, as an engineer, as a citizen, as a parent, all of that, safety is my top priority. One of the things that is unique, and I've been stressing this recently with us trying to fight for our local HER dollars, is that Baltimore is very unique because we are the only ones throughout the state of Maryland, the only locality that owns and maintains all of the roadways. We have all the state roadways, we have all the local roadways, whereas in the other counties, State Highway, for example, would have the state highways and the counties will have those local roadways. So there's a high demand and high need for the improvements within our city. Here's an overview of all of the different types of infrastructure and that we are responsible for. So we've got a high number of bridges, almost 300 bridges. And again, with all the number of streetlights and things, those vary. So the numbers aren't exact because we do include more infrastructure, but there's a monumental amount of assets that we oversee. With all of our projects, we have regular community engagement. One thing I'm glad to say is that in the past, we've had 5 community liaisons. I've strategically made some shifts and created another position, and so we're going to be advertising, recruiting for a new community liaison to increase our engagement and the coverage for those communities because of the high demands. We have a really great communications team. Awesome social media presence, really getting engaged with communities, with citizens, answering questions and trying to meet them where they are. So we have all the larger social media areas, but also Nextdoor and Reddit and other areas like that to really try to hone in on people. And then, of course, it's typical, there's 311, so residents can submit service requests and ask for needs for their communities through 311. So key challenges. DOT, of course, has many, many challenges. Our biggest challenges are related to funding and the rising costs. These costs are continuing to grow exponentially, and lack of funding started back in 2010 and has continued since then. This has grown into an enormous challenge that we experience today. We have roads that are riddled with potholes and multiple patches as shown here. We have situations where there are traffic signals that are rusting and falling because we do not have the funds to replace them. We have countless maintenance issues, unaddressed needs to improve infrastructure, and a backlog of unfunded requests. And the limited funding today not only creates higher maintenance costs, but ultimately results in higher construction costs because we are dealing with inflation and the higher costs of doing business. In just a 6-month period, we've seen a 30% increase in costs for concrete. And concrete is in so many of our projects. So even though we keep kicking the can, that can is going to get much more challenging later down the road. But we are continuing to seek out all funding opportunities. We have built great partnerships with our local entities, organizations, as well as our federal partners. And we have been very active in recent years under my leadership of going after major grants and securing federal dollars. So, breaking it down, we have the 42 million annually in federal funds, but of course, this requires that 20% local match, so it's approximately that 10.5 million. Now, from 2014 up until fiscal '24, we also had ended up taking out $15 million per year for county transportation bonds. This was done, and I'll show another image of this, but this was done to try to somehow close a little bit of the gap of the funding that was lost in past years. But you'll see where it really didn't help us. We stopped in '24 because now we're still having to continue paying the debt service back on those dollars that we borrowed. Overall, because of the cuts in HUR in 2010, the city was forced to borrow or issue bonds of $200 million. So a good portion of that debt is paid back, but we still have a good portion of it remaining to be paid back, that we pay back each year. So I've done this before. Of course, you'll see the trend. At one point, we were at 15% of the state HUR. Then that dropped, went down to 11.5. Then that dropped again. It went down to the 8.6, then the 7.9. And then it ranged from 7.5 to 8.3% total HUR. So that's where you can see that drastic roller coaster and that dip, the valley that's on that bottom map. And so even though in 2013 the state stopped allocating HUR to their general fund, so they stopped moving that money we used to get, they didn't then restore it and start giving back to us. And so those numbers stayed the same. But then in 2022, we were successful, legislatures were successful in getting that temporary increase in the HUR. And that's where, right now, what we're dealing with. So the state had proposed to not do that increase and kind of essentially have a cut to us. And so statewide, all of the counties and localities, all of us championed together. And so the state has agreed to maintain the dollars for fiscal '25, but '26 and beyond is still not guaranteed. So we still have to advocate for the needs of our city. And this is the graph I was telling you about. So you can see in 2004 to 2009 what those numbers look like. At one point, it was as high as 73 million HUR in the capital funding program. Because of the financial concerns, 2010, 2011, although we still had HUR for our operating, we didn't have any for capital. And then we got a little bit more in 5 and 12 and 5 and 13, but the city saw that we couldn't continue like this. We had to make some improvements to the infrastructure or it'd be catastrophic. And so that's where that red is shown there, where we then started taking out the money and incurring the debt. So, and then of course in 2024, we did get an influx of ARPA funds, but that's that one-time influx to our budget. And so we're still very much dependent now moving forward on all of those HUR and other local dollars.
And I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is the debt retired as of '23?
No, I think we still have approximately about 75 million remaining to be paid, and we typically pay about 14 million per year. So once that debt is paid, then I'll get that 14 million back into my capital budget.
Or we'll borrow more.
No. So, all right. And this is just a graph that shows you what the plan was. So under that House Bill 1187 is supposed to be that ramp up. And so what we were, working towards is just 25, getting that nice bump up to 11%. 26, it goes up to 12.2. 27 stays at 12.2, and then 28, it goes back to 9.5, because again, this was a temporary increase. So the plan was for the legislatures to then advocate to get that increase to go up and stay up continuously for the city.
Now, I'm sorry.
No, you're
Go
good.
ahead. As you said, though, after 2025, there's no guarantee that there's going to be any HUR funds.
Right.
Yeah, they just announced, yesterday, my days are so off. I'm sorry, my days are so off right now. But I think it was Tuesday. Anyway, they just announced that they are basically tapping into the general fund to fund all of the areas that they planned on cutting, they end up planning on cutting. So for '25, the LOPS program, what we were planning on having, we'll have that money, but it's not from HUR. So therefore, it's literally just a Band-Aid. There's not surgery to fix the whole thing. It's just a Band-Aid for 1 year. And so this next year is going to be really interesting. There needs to be a lot of advocacy. And I know there's a lot of coalitions and people trying to work on getting some improvements that are going to be longstanding for us.
If I could expand
Yes.
a little bit, there is a state commission looking at the decline in HUR revenues, which they feel is due to EV vehicles and other changes in the way we handle transportation. John Laria is on that commission, but just to put this in perspective and reinforce it, the director is fighting to get back a temporarily half of what we used to get. And we are the oldest jurisdiction in the state of Maryland. We are the poorest jurisdiction in the state of Maryland. And on a per capita basis, the state of Maryland is the wealthiest state in the country. So just put some perspective on what this director has to put up with.
And I would just like to add, for our purposes, we have a sense of what we can expect in fiscal '25, but fiscal '26 and beyond is very uncertain. It could be anywhere from 30 million for capital or less to 100 million should HB 1187 be fully maintained for the next 2 years. So that translates into decisions about design, what to get started, and how much to put in the pipeline to fund in the future, whether we spend our precious scarce dollars on design to put things in the pipeline to be able to spend that 100 million, should that come to pass, or fund things with a shorter timeline now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that happens with DOT and a lot with DPW too is, you ask for, or receive capital dollars for large projects and you receive them incrementally, building up to a total to actually fund that. It'd be a shame if we're anticipating money down the road that doesn't come to fruition and we partially funded a project that may never actually get constructed because it doesn't have the funds.
The example that I used in Annapolis was like it's like buying a new car, or if you buy a new house, you don't have that whole down payment up front. And so you set aside a little bit each month to get to the point where you have the down payment to then leverage the loan, or in this case, a lot of times the federal dollars, to then be able to get the whole thing. And so that's what our CIP process is. We set aside a little bit each year towards our design efforts. We set aside some to our construction efforts. And in a lot of cases, obviously, there's timelines. So when we have that NEPA approval from that point on, we need to get starting construction within 10 years. And so and there's no variance based on how large that project is, how much it costs. So some of our projects, like we have many of our bridge projects that we'll speak about as well, but we had to set aside that money and say, all right, we know we're moving forward, we have to get these bridges replaced, so we have no choice but to go on and prioritize those needs and make sure those projects have the funding. So we kind of go through a process of elimination of saying, well, this is what we have to fund because we have to get this bridge to construction. Then we have to do the urgent needs, safety stuff. We have to do this. And once we go through that, then we say, okay, what's left? And then in some years, it's like, oh, well, we have 6 million left. Well, we'll put $1 million per sector for resurfacing. We'll put 500,000 here. We'll put something there, and that's it. And you saw the road. So that obviously isn't significant enough for our resurfacing program when easily 70% of our roadways need to be resurfaced.
I could add one more thing for the new commissioners here. This is the only chance really in public that you get to see DOT's documentation of the state of good repair. That's part of what this is about today. They try to document what they need to do.
All right, so kind of in our discussion just now, I hit on some of the things that are on this slide, so I won't go over everything. But again, we are embarking on an effort to make all of our roadways safer and more aligned with the national best practices in traffic calming, complete streets, and things like that. And so our complete streets efforts are about protecting the safety of all people who use our streets, especially those most vulnerable users, pedestrians and bicyclists, because obviously if a pedestrian gets hit by a car, there's a great chance they don't go home. Whereas if you get in a car crash in your car, okay, you get damaged, you can replace the car, but you're typically okay. But we have to remember that transportation fundamentally serves accessibility and mobility. And so again, we're using those HUR dollars. It's critical for our modernization efforts, for traffic calming, for our improvements to our infrastructure. And then, also, because we're looking at the sustainable transportation, other alternatives, we have our Charm City Circulator, our Harbor Connector, our micromobility program, which is our scooters and our e-bikes, and then of course the bike facilities. Charm City Circulator in 2023 had approximately 1.3 million passenger trips. And we are working to make that even more equitable with our transportation development plan and establishing that cherry route as well. So again, when we're trying to make these improvements and meet much need people where they stand, because there's a large percentage of our residents, 27% of residents who do not have access to a personal vehicle, and in some communities that can be as high as 59%. All right, and then we have 27, potentially up to 30,000 students who use transit every day to get to and from school. So they're walking from their homes, they're taking the transit, they're going to school. They rely on all these other transportation options. And so it is critical for us to be able to continue, there we go, to continue investing in those programs. So we follow Complete Streets, our Complete Streets prioritization process. This is focused on equity, safety, asset condition, reducing the geographic boundary influence, and lessening complaint-driven work. So again, if you find a roadway that has very high number of complaints for potholes and other issues, and then we're able to come through, even some curb damages or sidewalk concerns, things like that, we come there and do the resurfacing project, all of that is eliminated. So all that time and effort that our maintenance forces are focused on that roadway, they can go elsewhere in the city because now that roadway and the infrastructure is at that acceptable state of good repair. And I just want to point out that when we invest in these areas and complete streets, walking, biking, or those transit users overall brings up the community. It results in a better quality of life. Overall, it's a lower cost of transportation. For many of our residents, a large percentage of their budget goes towards transportation. And so if we have those alternative options, that's more money they have available for the other areas of life.
I ask?
Yes.
What do you mean by reduced geographic boundary influence? I'm not sure what that means.
I think I had to explain it. Sorry, you caught me off guard on that one.
The fourth bullet point down.
Yeah. So if it's, say, for example, if you're here and then you're having to travel really far to somewhere else within your car or other means, if you're able to get to your community needs and things easier, you're able to walk to places, you're able to bike to places, you're able to access the stores and things in your area, that helps to build up that community itself.
So that, if I understand you, then you're talking about maybe optional ways in which to be not bound by certain barriers in your community.
Yeah, we have, like, for example, there are certain areas where you have almost like a highway, 2 lanes, 3 lanes in each direction, and pedestrians want to access the amenities across the street. But, but there's limiters that impacts that ability. All right, this slide gives you an overall estimate of our long-term capital needs. Because of inflation, we added in kind of just some percentage increases from last year to give you an idea of what the needs are. Safety and accessibility are again paramount for thriving communities. And so to correct the deferred maintenance and bring us to a state of good repair, you're looking at that $1.8 billion number overall. Now, obviously, you're going to take different chunks at it over time. And so that's why we are trying to be very strategic in capitalizing on those local dollars at 20%, and then going after the 80% from the feds. And right now, with all of the infrastructure dollars at the federal level, there are so many opportunities for us. This is kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to go after this money and get some big projects done. Let me see. All right, I'll move on.
In fact, if I could interrupt, to
Yes.
just look at the number in the middle, bottom of the middle, roughly $200 million. That's the real number to maintain our transportation system. And at one point, we had that 20-some years ago. But that's what it takes to keep the place going.
Let me make sure that we, as we've often heard from DGS, you have to invest the money to get it to a state of good repair, and then from that point on, to maintain it at that same state. So is it $1.8 billion to get all of your assets to the state of good repair, industry standards, and then from there, it's $200 million a year to maintain them at that state of good repair? Or alternatively, is it, in order to get to a state of good repair over the next 20 years, we're gonna have to spend $200 million?
Yeah, it was the 200 million is to get it to that state of good repair.
Okay.
It wouldn't then be 200 million.
But you recognize, like, again,
Yeah.
when we hear from DGS is our real estate assets, our, maintenance, deferred maintenance and everything. We need $500 million to get them up to a state of good repair, and then we need $60 million a year to maintain them at that level.
Yeah, it would be a
Those are
lower-
rough
lower
numbers, those
maintenance
are
number.
just made-up numbers, but I just want to make sure that when we're talking this, it's, okay, $200 million over the next 20 years will get us up to that state of good repair, and then from that point on, what is the annual cost to maintain them at that state of good repair? Is it still $200 million?
Not for the maintenance piece. I don't know if we have that number specifically from a maintenance standpoint, but I guess, for example, if you're thinking about bridges, like we've got bridges that are over 100 years old. So we still do maintenance and we do certain repairs and we have those inspections, things like that. Obviously, that's gonna be, bridges are more expensive when it comes to the projects. But then the maintenance on them, I mean, we're not out there on an annual basis having to do maintenance on the bridge, so then those costs aren't there. Even like we have a lot of our concrete roadways, concrete is more expensive, but concrete also is gonna last longer.
Right.
So if we have the money to put into those concrete road plates and get them up, then they're gonna be good for a good amount of time before we have to do anything, before we have to adjust any of the cracks or anything that might pop up in them. So it does kind of vary, but getting our assets to that level, that state of good repair level, will make significant improvements. And honestly, then from an operational standpoint, we won't have to be spending so much of the HUR on the operations side by our maintenance force, and that money can be reallocated and used in other ways, so.
But that also assumes that your assets remain the same, that there's nothing added into the asset pool.
Well, yeah. I mean, but the thing about Baltimore City, one is like, I don't see us, we're not building necessarily brand new bridges. We're not expanding highways and roadways like there are everywhere else in the state. So we're trying to really work with what we have. There might, it's a lot of the replacements, it's a lot of the rehabilitation. If we're gonna add things, it might be adding things like, well, it's still within the roadway typically, but things like maybe like the trails or stuff like that. That's gonna be brand new. Or if you have new lighting, new signals, those are gonna be more of the new things you'll see. But as far as really comes to like really roadways and things that are more expensive, there shouldn't be as many of those new assets
All
added
right,
in.
my last question then. So does the $200 million include, when you bring an asset up to the state of good repair, complying with complete streets, the complete streets legislation? So are we basically?
Does that, I'm not, does that, because it was a couple of years ago, thank you. Does he need to come up here? Or is he okay there?
Yeah, come on up, introduce yourself.
We are recording these.
Exactly, that's, yeah.
Yeah, Robert O'Brien, helps with the CIP, Chief of Program Management. So the second column that you see there isn't actually the first column divided by 20 directly. It does include an annual upkeep along with that. So it's two figures added together, and they're obviously very large estimates and ballpark numbers, but it is inclusive of complete street elements as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's required by law now.
Right, but it doesn't mean we do it.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll quickly roll through our recent accomplishments. So we had the Martin Luther King Boulevard at Howard Street improvements, as well as Sharp Lidenhall. And a lot of our projects, again, are gonna help with that economic generator. So there's, with the Sharp Lidenhall in particular, there was a developer and some work going on in that area, so they had a portion of the right-of-way. They were responsible for upgrading, and then we came in to do like our portion. So now you have that whole complete area that's been addressed in that partnership. With alleys and footways, over 360,000 square feet of sidewalk repaired, over 130,000 alleys, and nearly 18,000 linear feet of curbs reconstructed. With our resurfacing program, and again, this is the capital portion, so completed 18.7 lane miles. We, of course, from an operations standpoint, we do some internal resurfacing as well. So in case you see somewhere our Orange County see a larger number, know that there's some capital program with contractors and there's some internal for the local roadways as well. And again, as you see here, like the Harford Road, it's got the bump outs, it's got the crosswalks, it's got the green paint over where the orange barrels are, where there's bike facilities. So when we're going in and we're doing our resurfacing projects, actually they're more expensive now because we are including those complete streets elements. But again, it's that complete project to kind of meet all the transportation needs. Then our bridge projects, this was about 33 million. Excuse me. So the Browning Highway project is still under construction, but we recently had a ribbon cutting for the Phoenix Road over Gunpowder Falls Bridge. This is actually, in case we don't know, this is actually in Baltimore County, but because it's a part of the water system for the city, it is our infrastructure. And so we partnered with DPW and Baltimore County to do this project. For our bike infrastructure, we've recently completed 8.7 lane miles of new bike infrastructure, and some of the examples are shown here. In DOT planning, we have many things going on. Of course, there's a West Baltimore United, also known as Highway to Nowhere, so we have that planning project underway. We have various community placemaking projects, so that's where communities may come in and say, we want to improve the intersection and do some crosswalk improvements, intersection art, and other things. So that keeps us engaged with the community. We have various quick build installations to work for our Towards Zero efforts of trying to eliminate deaths and serious injuries on our roadways. We have the partnership with the school system to help create safer routes for students. And then there's the 28th Street Road Diet. And then we'll get into our requests. All right, so here's the breakdown, the 42 million shown for federal dollars, the 59 from the general, which infuses HUR, and then the other of 16 million represents some of the private payments we have for our footways and alleys, as well as some grant money that we've received as well, that's just being built into the budget.
So 117 total? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, yes.
My math?
Yes.
I was never really good at that, so.
I'm sorry, say again.
I said I was never really good at math.
Yeah, and I'm still like half asleep, so I'm just, I'm not good with my math right now. A little tired.
126 million.
Okay, thank you. You know, you'll see where of course, the larger areas are gonna be the resurfacing, reconstruction, and then our safety and traffic calming efforts. But again, the safety and traffic calming is a little bit bigger because we got some substantial grants. So that's what make that difference there. So for the federal breakdown, again, that $42 million target, you can see the majority of it is going towards our reconstruction projects. A portion of it is towards our traffic, so we're using a lot of federal dollars to help with our traffic signal reconstruction efforts and some other activities out there, and then we have the bridge and bikes. And this is the breakdown for our local funding. Again, majority of it is going towards resurfacing, but then similar to the previous slide, the safety aspect is pretty high. The ADA that's there, the majority of that 5 million for the ADA goes towards the ADA ramps needed to support our local internal resurfacing efforts. So we do the capital construction for the ramps, and we have our internal crews who do the resurfacing of the roadways. And then there's the about 2.7 for planning, 4.1 for traffic, almost 5 million for bridges, 1.5 million for bikes, almost 7 million for alleys and footways, and then about 2.6 for reconstruction. This is just a visual graphic of kind of showing where those projects are located and the different color coding. So my apologies if anyone is colorblind. So of course the red is the reconstruction, blue are planning efforts, Green would be our bridges, purple traffic, and orange bikes. And then the dots, of course, are all of the alleys and footways projects. So getting into the specific request in this CIP. Alleys and footways overall is the 6.9 million. Now, for each of these slides, the blue total dollar that I have here is going to be specifically those local dollars. So I want to make sure to separate the federal and the local, so you know what we're speaking of. Traffic safety, it's 8.6 million. You'll see like in that first line, we have the 2.7 general, but there's that 10.9. That 10.9 was, proud to say, for the Safe Streets for All project, that was the largest award grant throughout the country. And so that will go a long way for us in our implementation, demonstration, education, and outreach regarding safety and complete streets and all those components. Various neighborhood traffic calming. One thing that's different about that is our approach in neighborhood traffic calming and some of our other traffic calming efforts. It used to be that the agency would do a lot of like improvements here and there in different locations, but now we're taking an approach of like looking within a kind of a geographical area to assess the requests we're having, to go there and observe and see if there's a lot of different issues going on and try to come up with a collective approach to make improvements in that community. And that way we're better utilizing our resources, addressing more of those needs within the community and reducing those service requests. We also have for the HSIP, each year we apply for highway safety improvement grants through the state. And so we've been successful in acquiring those. So that's that 3.6 million you'll see there with that very small match of the $900,000. This slide kind of gets a little bit into some of what I just referenced about the grants. We also had a $1 million Safe Streets for All grant. And that's going to be for our safety action plan. And we work with local partners such as Morgan State University, University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins to work on these grant efforts, utilizing their research efforts. I'll go on there. For bikes, so through grant funding from Rails to from RTC, Baltimore City and Black People Ride Bikes acquired money for DOT to install 3 new bike counters. So some of the questions we've been having is, well, how many people bike? What's happening on the roadways? So we're trying to answer those questions. And so those locations include the Jones Falls Trail and the Herring Run Park. And other than the 3 bike counters that will be installed, we also have 10 active counters that collect data each day. So we are working on trying to get some more of that information, and we'll be able to provide that once that whole analysis is complete. All right, getting into bridges, the top 4, or the orange ones, are projects that are for construction funding, and then the rest on the list are for design funding. So again, this is our effort to try to get that down payment all together so that we can move forward with the larger values, larger dollars. And these are some images of some of our inspections of the bridges, some of the conditions. I mean, obviously, I want to make sure and allay any concerns that if we ever do an inspection, we find where there is a concern, where it needs immediate action, or it's unsafe, we take immediate action and we'll shut down the bridge. So sometimes I know pictures like this can be alarming to people, but don't think that because you see those pictures that the bridge is going to collapse. It's a structural issue, a safety issue. So it's not there, but that's why we need to keep moving forward so that we don't get to the point of having to close a bridge, because that is a real thing.
But just in case, where are those bridges? No.
All right, so this is the breakdown of our resurfacing requests. So this represents 22.3 million. As you see, these are some examples of some areas of our roadways and the conditions of them. And unfortunately, when we get this request for pothole repairs, is literally the maintenance teams going out there and using the asphalt to kind of patch the holes, but of course, those potholes reopen. So it really only full mill and resurface is going to address those concerns. Try to pick up some speed. Breakdown of our reconstruction and streetscape projects. Again, the top 5 in orange are for construction. The rest are for design efforts. The one at the very bottom, the Keefe Avenue, for example, is a concrete roadway and serves support and a lot of the trucking industry. So that one has some major issues And there's been a lot of outcry from the community, the industry, on getting that project done. But the key thing at the bottom is even though we're asking for about 2.6 million local dollars, we're leveraging about 24 million in federal funds for these projects. Traffic signals, I mean, we have so many different traffic signals. We have over 130 signals that really need to be reconstructed. And so again, we're leveraging those federal dollars, but we keep each year trying to go after more and more dollars so that we can put contracts out there to reconstruct them. So we have efforts for about, I think, 20 to 30 different signals right now that we're working towards reconstructing, and then other improvements along these corridors. One, in fact, the Orleans Street and Gay Street was found to be the top intersection in the city of Baltimore for crashes. Based on the city analysis, this intersection is ranked first in severity and crash frequency, and third in crash rate traffic crashes. And so we, again, with those prioritization efforts, we look at the safety and the equity and all those other needs. So this is why this is one of our prioritized projects. For planning, we have, a good number of different projects listed here. One, for example, Harford Avenue, is Harford and Inser Street South of North Avenue is a major barrier highway within the neighborhood. You've got Johnson Square Elementary and Dunbar Athletic Field, so we're trying to look at ways of, again, addressing these in that community and kind of eliminating more of that highway feel and increase safety. And then Hamilton Avenue is a streetscape in unison with the Gardenville Recreation Center. So a lot of times we'll also partner up with our other agencies. So if they have projects in the area of rehabbing recreation centers or schools or other things like that, then we'll try to align our efforts to meet the right-of-way needs in conjunction with those projects. I touched on this before about the $5 million that's to match our local resurfacing, and the accommodation request is really individual. If whenever our citizens reach out needing some type of ADA accommodation, this provides us funding to be able to then go and do the design and construction and make those quicker improvements for them. Here's just an overview breakdown of our major programs in our CIP. So it's, 31 for bridges, 20 for reconstruction, 40 for traffic, 20 for bikes, and 56 for resurfacing. And of course, I have touched on a little bit before, but about the equity component of Complete Streets. That is completely woven into our process. And we use asset condition and safety as well as equity. And next I'll be showing you actually an equity map. But the factors that were considered in the map are public transit usage, household vehicle access, household income, race, and median age of residents. And so here's that map. Again, it's an equity composite index score that includes those areas listed. And so just to wrap it up, maintaining and restoring the city's transportation infrastructure is a critical component of what we're doing. The upkeep needs are reflected in our request. We're trying to transform our streets from what used to be those highways and just trying to get people as fast in and out of the city to really focusing on the neighborhoods. Like Baltimore is a city of community, city of neighborhoods, really. And so we're trying to serve our residents and visitors as well for years to come. And finally, we are, again, working towards those zero traffic fatalities. So for me, as an engineer, again, as this director, safety is critical, is an essential part of our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so questions, starting off with Commissioner Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for the presentation. I was involved with transportation years ago when I used to be part of Public Works, and I definitely recall the loss of HUR funding as being catastrophic for our city. And I appreciate you mentioning the fact that we are the only jurisdiction that is responsible for all roadways within our borders. The counties have the luxury of having their state roads taken care of by the State Highway Administration, and I don't think a lot of people appreciate that issue. I did have a couple of questions about sustainability issues. And I'm trying to remember, I apologize, we don't have access to the breakdown here, but as I recall from looking at your list last night, there were two projects that struck me. One was the pedestrian area in the Inner Harbor, and I'll take for an example, the Kelly Avenue Bridge. Both of these are impacted by changes in our climate, more particularly flooding issues. I know that for the Kelly Avenue Bridge, they have to move all of the mail up onto the bridge in their trucks when they're at hazard of flooding. And so for those types of projects where it's more than just addressing an older bridge or addressing some of the repairs that are needed along that brick pathway, are we looking at the impact of climate change on, for example, those two issues? Are we going to be patching a pedestrian pathway that's going to be inundated constantly, which is only going to aggravate the costs to keep it repaired? And in the case of the Kelly Avenue Bridge, are we looking at not just the need to address that bridge because of its age, but because of the constant impact of flooding threats? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for those questions. So the short answer is yes. So whenever we are looking at projects, we're looking at those needs, those conditions, the issues that exist now and the issues to come to try to account for those. So obviously, the Inner Harbor, the Promenade, there, certain areas that have those issues with climate change and flooding, rising sea levels and things like that. So all of that, hold on.
Oh, good, you have one.
So, so all of that is considered in that design process. I don't know, Bimo, do you have anything more you could add? My voice is kind of going out.
Yeah, my name is Bimal Depkoda. I'm the Chief of Engineering and Construction. Regarding the Kelly Avenue Bridge, what we do is on all our bridges, it's a federally mandated, and every 2 years we do the inspection. And as of now, the bridge is not in poor condition. But again, every time it floods, that's a couple of bridges we have. That's one of the bridges we go out every time when there is a flood, and then we inspect that bridges. But in terms of design, we don't have any program for that.
Right. Okay, so, but still, okay, so I don't think that necessarily fully answered your question, but the short answer is yes, that when we go through that design evaluation process, the environmental concerns are a part of that as well. So it's not going to be dismissed and just put back things the way they were. So there are times where we might do a bridge replacement and you change the height of the bridge, or you change the underlying design of it to get out of certain waterways to avoid some of the impacts that you might experience. So same thing with these projects that you've referenced. Those are considerations.
Anything else, Commissioner? Commissioner McCoach?
I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner Jolin?
Thank you for the presentation. Really helpful to learn all about the process, and everybody knows I'm one of the newer commissioners, so thank you. I do acknowledge that the need is great in Baltimore City, so thank you for really putting out numbers. But I was curious on the triaging of need. So especially when it comes to sidewalks and street repair, is the triage based in last time of repair, usage, or constituent complaints? I would love to know more about that process and how you select in the city what needs to happen in the next fiscal year.
Okay, so our sidewalk program has different components to it. So the reality is that per our city charter, sidewalk maintenance is supposed to be the responsibility of the property owners. Obviously, that doesn't really happen on a regular basis like it should. But, so what we do here at the city is we have our footways contracts where we will do some of that work. So essentially, say if you had a concern about the sidewalk out front of your house, it was a tripping hazard or something like that, you put in a service request. The very first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna notify our maintenance crews, and they'll go out and try to make it temporarily safe, which means typically adding some asphalt, ramping it up or something to kind of make it a little more gradual. Then that'll go over to the footways team for review. And the very first thing they're gonna do is send out notification to the residents, say, hey, this needs to be repaired. We're kind of giving you an opportunity to fix it. If they're not gonna fix it, then we'll go on and add it into our program. So like we said, we have about a 7-year backlog, honestly, of those type of requests. But, it might be 2 to 3 years sometimes where we're then actually getting able to go out there and do the work. So what we end up doing is we have the design, we get the funding through this process, we get our contract on board, and then we'll go on and assign those individual locations. And then once the work is complete, whatever portion of it that is the property owner's responsibility, then that's where they get a bill for that amount. And then they pay that back to the city for their portion of it. So that's one way things are done. Another way is I reference the ADA accommodations. So if someone truly does have, if it's a person with a disability, something that they need, some type of access, then that's more prioritized. So they'll go and work with my ADA coordinator. We'll go through and do a review, design, construction plan, and try to see if we can do something temporarily. But if not, then we try to more quickly get that programmed out and assigned to a contractor for construction. So those, depending on what the request is, it might be something that we could do as soon as maybe 3 months in some cases, or sometimes it may be a little bit further out because there's a fire hydrant there or utility pole or some other impacts. So that kind of varies, but those are more prioritized. Then you have our resurfacing projects. Anytime we do resurfacing, or reconstruction, the ramps and things are going to be included in those projects. So typically, with resurfacing, we're going to be doing those ramps. And so those would be constructed, be ADA compliant. If it's a streetscape type of reconstruction project, we're going in an entire corridor, maybe it includes lighting and things. More frequently, we'll include sidewalk as well. So if it's something where it needs a complete reconstruction of the sidewalk, then that'll happen. Or if it's a matter where we identify certain panels along the stretch that need to be replaced, we'll just replace those panels. As far as the prioritization, it still kind of ebbs and flows with our overall prioritization project process. So our resurfacing, we're really looking at the resurfacing priorities, and then the sidewalk is resulting from that. Or the reconstruction projects are going to be generated because we see that they have a lot of crashes along this corridor, and there's pedestrian safety needs. And so that streetscape might be a priority for us. And then as a component of that, we're then doing the sidewalks and the ramps and things as well. So it just kind of varies depending on the request. You're welcome.
Thank you for the presentation. As I think through these things, some of my questions are just related to just a degree of readiness to act on the funding that we would give you. So one of the challenges that you talk about is staffing, in terms of understaffing or, just staffing in critical positions. So just kind of wanted to update in terms of your staffing moving forward, kind of where you are as an agency. And if you're not there, sort of what are your plans to kind of address the staffing challenge?
Okay, so we are very active, have been very active, I'll say definitely this past year, in trying to fill critical positions. We've been filling certain engineer positions. I'll say in the last month, and then even myself over the upcoming probably couple months, have some active interviews underway for some of our key chief positions. We're also working to do some strategic review of our divisions, and trying to potentially break things out so that we can have a greater focus in certain areas. I think, and wherever we are, lacking, like if it was the actual design level staff, for example, then obviously, yes, we are enlisting the support of consultant staff. So we're trying to use that very selective, where we critically need to, and then other things we can do in-house, we're doing in-house. So we have the means of getting work done. And then as we continue to ramp up and recruit and fill those positions, then we, let go of some of the consultants if we no longer need them. So hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, that's good luck with that.
Okay.
My second question has to do with funding. That's another thing we kind of look at in terms of agencies' ability to leverage the funding that we give. I didn't know if you can talk a little bit about your plans for that, particularly federal funding. Are there any grants or different opportunities that you want to talk about briefly to us in terms of your I guess plan for getting additional funding for your agency?
No, it's constant. It's constant. So there's we have staff within the planning division that are constantly working on grants. We partner up with the Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development and their teams to search for and provide applications and go after grants. So again, like I said, we got in this first round, we got the Reconnecting Communities grant, which was $2 million. We got the Safe Streets for All grant of $10.9 million, which was the largest for the country. We got another $1 million Safe Streets for All grant. We've gotten some other grants for I think Boston Street kind of side path trail project effort. I know there's many other grants. I don't know if Stu, my interim deputy director for planning, has any others he wants to throw out, but this is a very active process for DOT. We are very hungry for going after and leveraging those dollars. And that's, again, just why those local dollars for us are so critical. As you saw in the presentation, those other categories, we went after the other highway safety improvement grants from State Highway, and we've gone after others. So we are trying to build up our funding portfolio with as many different options as possible.
No more questions. Thanks.
Councilman Costello? Any questions?
Thank you, Director, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Stevenson?
Director Johnson, thank you so much. I want to thank you for the presentation. Also, thank you for your commitment to DOT's priorities, safety and complete streets. It's been great to see your leadership. So a lot of my concerns and interest in the CIP process in general is around looking at our outer years and sort of tracking consistency. And so some of my questions are, there's so much information here. These are just kind of representative questions to help me understand the agency's thinking and the process. So please bear with me.
No worries.
So I'll try to start with the easy ones. And so again, just as an example, if I look at the Old Town Mall project, last year was budgeted for $4 million in 2027. We still have money budgeted in 2027 for that project, which is the first thing that I'm looking for, so that's great. But it's $3 million as opposed to the 4. Is that representative of broad cuts, or is there something specific about that project that the funding was reduced?
I'll start. So I don't think there was anything specific about the project. Again, it's again kind of like matter of us trying to figure out what we have to fund and what we can go back and find in other areas. That's a situation of us trying to build up the bank for it. Of course, I don't know if everyone's aware, but in Old Town Mall, there's a developer effort, of course, for that. And then there's let's say the city portion of it that we're trying to build up the funds for to work towards the design and the construction for that. Robert, is there anything else additional to add insights to why there may have been a change aside from just limited funding? If you're going to answer, you got to come up here though.
So we are actively working on design efforts toward that project, but I will say last year we had an $80 million target, whereas this year our target is $59 million, so we did have to make some reductions across the board to those projects. As the design progresses, we'll reevaluate the costs and estimates for construction.
Okay.
And accordingly.
Thank you. You might want to stay close. So, and I'll have more questions that I'll probably follow up with. I'm not gonna give you all the specific ones here. This one's pretty specific though. Camden Skywalk looks like it's a negative number. Is there an explanation for that?
Yes. So, do you want to? You can. That'll give me a break.
Yeah, that was an agreement between the convention center and DOT and the mayor's office we had budgeted $650 million for that project in the past. The convention center received some state funds, I believe, and committed to doing that project.
Let me add a little bit more. So the plan was for us initially was to remove it. But then the convention center and the Hyatt, they all advocated and said, well, hell, with our our development efforts for the convention center, this crosswalk is needed, and they said, hey, we've leveraged with the state to have funding to handle the reconstruction of it. But since you already had this money for the removal, can you at least give it to us to help towards like a local match? And so that's what we agreed to do. So the project's still going to happen, but instead of it just being gone, it's going to be reconstructed as part of the the convention center efforts.
So just from an accounting cash flow perspective, we previously allocated that money and now we're getting it back, or we're simply not spending that money?
You should see a positive 650 within the convention center's program.
Understood. I have questions on that one too.
Okay.
Thanks. So this is a more general question. So we have money budgeted for strategic repairs, emergency repairs every year. It looks like it's $1 million a year.
That's for the bridge, I believe?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's great. I'm sure that it's never enough. I also see we've got a project, Dartmouth retaining wall, that looks like it's an emergency repair. So, one of the other things that I'm looking for are projects that weren't previously budgeted that all of a sudden we're spending money on this year. In an emergency situation, that obviously makes sense. So my question is, we budgeted $1 million for emergency repairs last year. This project looks like $2.3 million. So is that being partially funded by the $1 million that we budgeted for emergency repairs last year? And along with everything else, and is $1 million the right number to be setting aside if a single project can cost over $2 million?
Yeah, so the difference is the retaining wall is more of like, think of more like a specific project, replacement reconstruction effort, whereas the emergency repairs would be if we find some type of emergency issue with a bridge deck, or there's some other component of the structure that needs to get addressed, issues with the joints or other things. So anytime we have a specific identified project that we're then going through a design process for, then it's going to be typically itemized individually. But if we get a report that there's some issue on a bridge, we send in inspectors, we find that, yep, there's an issue here, we need to quickly make some repairs. If you don't make repairs in the next 2 months, we're gonna have to close the bridge, then that's where that $1 million helps to leverage and go out and do those repairs. So anything that's urgent that kind of comes up in our over the course of the year, that $1 million goes towards those efforts.
I guess my question then is, if it's not an emergency, then how does a project like that get to the front of the line if it wasn't previously budgeted?
You're referring to the retaining wall?
Yes.
That's been, I don't know.
And let me know if I missed it somewhere. Obviously it's a
That
large.
project has been in
Yeah,
previous
that's all.
CIPs. I don't recall if we had it in the program last year, but it was budgeted for design in the past. It was named as a specific project
Okay.
in the past.
Forgive me then.
Thank you.
So this question is along the same lines, and forgive me if I missed this one somewhere. And again, this is meant to be a general question. It's nothing specific about this project, but the Green Meadows Bridge, pedestrian bridge, looks like that's budgeted in the upcoming year, and I didn't see that in previous years. Did I miss that, or is that a new project?
No, you didn't miss that. That's something because we didn't know how much we needed to request, so we completed a initial feasibility study and concept for that, and so we got to a point where we could then start requesting funding for it.
Okay. And so again, Representative, my question is just how did these things end up in next year if it's a new project? I understand the urgency, I understand the scarcity of funds, but shouldn't these things be, so, I'll go
Programmed
through
on a
and-
late, so you would like to see, if there's items that are coming into this year's CIP request for 2025, that they had shown up in prior CIP requests, maybe for 2025 spending. And now it's 2025 and we're asking for this. So when a new program or a new improvement pops up, it's like, why is that popping up and bumping out somebody else? Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. And I understand things in things change in 6 years, and sometimes we have to adjust for outside funding that we're matching, budgets change, priorities change, but I'm just really sensitive to things that are coming seemingly out of nowhere and then showing up in this year. So my last set of questions is around the ADA stuff. And so like these improvements are absolutely critical, and I'm glad to see that we're prioritizing them, I hope. I'm trying to understand the extent to which we're spending on these things now. So it looks like we've got 3 items in the budget related to ADA accommodation requests and remediation, ADA leveraging neighborhood equity enhancement development, and ADA resurfacing reconciliation and modification. It seems like there was more items in last year's budget, so my assumption is that some of those are just condensed.
So, hold on. Find it in here. Too many pages. Okay, that's okay. So I think I believe last year, we also received some additional state funding. And then there were some other efforts that we were putting into the CIP from outside sources and then trying to put in some match dollars. This year, the 5 million is representative of the internal resurfacing efforts and the money needed to do construction for ADA ramps to support internal resurfacing. And then like I said, the accommodation requests are just kind of like one-off. So, I know like in Northwest area, there was someone who requested, said she had issues, accessing with the wheelchair, and so we needed to make some changes to the ramp to make that safe and accessible. And also we look at situations if someone is trying to leave their home and maybe get to the bus stop right down there, and there's some type of impediment for them to be able to go to and from that location. We look for any type of improvements that we need to make. So that's for the accommodations, that's kind of those one-offs that pop up. So there's no overall program prioritization for that, but it's really just prioritized when those requests come in and trying to get the work done. And then just generally when we do our ADA project specifically, we're going to be looking at, and we're currently working on our transition plan and working with the public on trying to understand the public's needs and priorities for this effort. But some of the things that we consider are the transit access, the access needed to get to services, to hospitals, to stores and things. So some of those quality of life needs for anyone who is dependent on the ADA infrastructure.
So my question, for example, if I look at ADA resurfacing, reconciliation, and modification, there's 15 million budgeted in 26 through 30, but $0 this year.
So, and that's based on the anticipated increase in HUR for next year. That was based on that formula increase. So based on our target, the 59 million target for this year, we built in the budget as best we could. If I could put more money in there, it would be great,
But
yeah.
if I look at last year's budget, we had 3.39 million budgeted this year for that.
So even though we put the budget in, and Robert might be speak to a little bit more, but even though we put in numbers for those outer years, we recognize that we're really having to hone in on this specific year, and then based on the needs and the priorities, things that come up over that course of time, we may have to make some adjustments. And so, yeah.
And we understand, I understand that, and my expectation is that it probably gets less accurate each year out that you go, but.
Real quickly, and forgive me if I missed this in your original question, but the ARPA money that was allocated towards DOT, the lion's share of that was for ADA ramp stuff, right?
Yes, so,
And
I think
how are we doing on that?
17.1 million is for the ADA, and I think 10 million went towards resurfacing. So we have one contract that I think, one contract that's in the process of either being awarded or getting notice to proceed soon, and then two other contracts that advertised, the end of '23. And so we're working through getting those out to the contractor. So there's a large amount of ADA work that's going to be happening, both under those specific ADA contracts as well as the resurfacing contracts. We'll be doing ramps as well.
And none of that $17 million is included in the 2025, that's separate.
Because it was a
that's back.
one-time and it was just shown
And
separately. It wasn't even in the '24 CIP budget. It was shown separately.
Yeah, I know there was an, and we're confident that we're gonna be able to spend those monies in the stipulated timeframe.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know whether that related to your question, but, wanted to get that out.
I see, I mean, this one, and it's just a discrepancy in what we showed for year 25 last year versus what we're showing now. And I understand evolution, but we went from a large number to zero. So I'm just wondering if if that money's coming from somewhere else or where it went or what the thinking is.
Sure. So I think Kristen mentioned in the beginning, this year, our target was the 59 million, which is a pretty accurate to what we're hopeful for. Whereas last year's, we had a little bit of a higher target in the immediate first year and the outer years, being the 25 and 26 that you saw and are comparing against there. So I think that may be where you're seeing a little bit of the difference in what was projected in last year versus what we're submitting this year. And then again, to the ARPA, I think with a lot of the ADA stuff, we're very focused toward meeting those timelines and those spendings.
Keep in mind, last year, our target was 80 million. And so, but I think, like I said, this year is 59, which I think 59 is probably gonna be the more realistic number, whereas before, we had that higher target. And so we were able to kind of build in to that budget other line items with a lot more money. So I think this one's a little more realistic of what will happen this fiscal year. But it doesn't mean, obviously, that we're gonna be actively doing work under the ARPA
Yeah.
money.
Kristen, you want to explain what we did last year versus this year? I think the commissioner
Well,
be
and
reminded.
not to put words in your mouth, but the 3 million or the amount was programmed in the CIP, so it wasn't necessarily the difference in targets. But I'd have to go back and look at the total that was programmed for fiscal '25 for DOT and whether this year represents a cut from what was ultimately programmed. So that's,
I understand, and again, thank you. First of all, you do incredible work. This is one of the hardest and most important in budgets, and that's one of the reasons that I spent so much time looking at it. Obviously, the budget is a reflection of our priorities. When our funding is reduced, our spending has to be reduced. But especially, when we look at the criteria that we are supposed to evaluate the budget under, federal mandate is one of them, which does, of course, apply to ADA. So to see it go from a large number to zero, and I know there's spending on other lines, so it's not zero, but to see that number reduced even more so than the 80 million to 50 million target by a percentage, maybe just makes me wonder if that's appropriate and if we're comfortable with that in terms of, consent decree, et cetera. But thank you. I don't have any further questions.
What I would suggest that we do to address that is between now and our deliberations, future deliberations, is let's dive into that a little more and just understand what we're mandated to do. Because the question's been asked and raised, and thank you for diving into the details of the budget to raise that. I think it's very legitimate. Let's get the answer. complete answer for you with Director Johnson's help. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Allen's been sitting afar the entire time, incognito. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm sorry, I just didn't want to be rude and come through in the public part of your presentation and sit right smack in the middle. But no, thank you, I'm very impressed with your presentation.
Thank you.
So real quickly, I just have a couple questions for you. So how does Baltimore City compare to other jurisdictions in the state regarding our highway user revenues? We're getting 57 million. Anne Arundel, Howard, what do they get? Do you know?
I don't know the exact breakdown. I know that we have, obviously, the vast majority of the HUR share. Do you have numbers? No, I've seen it, I've
So
seen it, I
I
just
guess
don't
my-
have the.
Most
The
municipalities.
thrust of my question is really simple. Why don't we just stop maintaining state roads? Why don't we just turn around and say, okay, you're not gonna give us any money to maintain these, we're just gonna not maintain them, and then you know what, when all our residents start, forgive me for pitching at us, we're just gonna say, nope, go talk to your state delegate or your state senator about this. Why are we, we're the only jurisdiction in the state that maintains state roads within our jurisdiction, and if we're not given adequate money to do that, then we should just stop doing it, because we have other city-owned assets that we should. So what I would like to know is, and you're smiling, thank you. What I would like to know is, how much are we spending, on state roads in our budget? And is the 57 million, the bridges, everything that we have to do within the state road right-of-way, are we getting, our share of that, short-term and long-term? Because it's incumbent on everybody on this commission, if that's the one thing that we can go and get more money from, and especially specifically for DOT, it's HUR money. And we should be lobbying our delegates and saying, hey, this is a huge component of our DOT budget. You can't cut this. Every year, since 2010, when you needed that money to balance the budget, it's been gone, and now we need it back. So I don't want you to put yourself on the hot spot on that, but I think that we need to really analyze, this is what we spend on state roadways within our jurisdiction, and this is what we get, and it's not there. So we need more.
Yeah. The only thing I will share, I guess, two aspects is one thing that's different about us than State Highway, and I've been, I'll just stop there, is that we again are very, at least in recent years with the team that's here now, we are extremely active in going after grant money. State Highway isn't really as active in doing that. And so we leverage the dollars better and get greater investment into the roadways. Then unfortunately, I fear that if the state did it, then the money wouldn't go as far. That's the first thing. And then also, by us having the roadways, we have that authority, decision-making ability to really prioritize the city's needs as opposed to the state overall looking at the needs across the state and then prioritizing projects here and here and here. So, if you imagine the state's trying to do expansion projects and all of that, there's no guarantee that if they were to take back all the roads and get all the money back, that money would still come and translate into projects for the city. That money could potentially then go to funding expansion, widening, congestion relief projects and stuff elsewhere.
Okay.
I did have over 17 years with State Highway, and I know the experience. I had a senior manager there trying to advocate for some of the funding and the projects that I needed to take care of to address real issues, flooding issues on the roadways and other things as well. And at times it was frustrating to get those projects the much needed funding. So I don't know that having them take it over would put us overall in a better
I don't
situation.
want them to take it over. The gist of my comment is to
No, I
say-
understand your comment.
Okay.
Wholeheartedly, yes.
Real quickly, we've got to wrap this up, but I just want to get a couple things in, and I don't necessarily. Did you receive the Bike More letter that was posted? Okay, so we need to make sure that you get it. It's on our CIP. Jed Weeks submitted a letter. He's obviously very complimentary, but he's saying, we're still, in terms of the bike master plan, we're falling behind. I just want to make sure that we get that on the record, that, the bike master plan is something that's been adopted, and we need to continue to push to implement that. That we're continuing to work, you're continuing to work with DPW on, your infrastructure improvements. They're replacing a sewer line or a water line or something like that, that we're coming in after them and resurfacing,
They're
not
doing
coming
it.
in before, and then they're.
Yeah, oh, that coordination will work, yes.
Yeah, so just there's that, and I think that's all I have, and I really greatly appreciate your time. I'm sure if there's other questions, we'll funnel them through Kristen, who can get back to you.
All right.
Great.
Thank you, appreciate it, Tom, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.